Take your Bibles, let's go to Ruth chapter 1. And Ruth is a wonderful book. It's a story within a story, really. There's a couple things going on because it's telling a wonderful love story on one end, but it's also telling another wonderful love story. It's telling the love story between God, Jesus Christ, and His people. And so it's kind of a story within a story, and there's lots of elements, lots of themes that go on. But I think Ruth is a good thing. There are some things about the book of Ruth that are going to pop up, some principles. One is going to be one of courtship. One is going to be one of responsibility. Another thing you're going to see in here is lack of responsibility. But there's going to be a lot of things, and God really places this section of this book historically against the backdrop of the time of the Judges. In fact, read verse 1, the first part. It says, Ruth chapter 1, verse 1, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled." Now, this is a particular time period. And the time period where the judges ruled, that word ruled is actually the Hebrew word judged. When the judges judged, is an extremely bloody, controversial, dark time in Israel's history. I mean, at that time, actually, let's just look at it. Why don't you turn your page one to the left, go to the last page of the book of Judges. And who would like to read?
I can.
Why don't you read verse 25?
In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes.
So every man did that which was right in his own eyes. This is a contrast. Not what was right in the Lord's eyes, what was right in his own eyes. And so during this time, it was a time of moral bankruptcy, social degeneracy, national poverty. It was just a bad time. And God would raise up judges to really kind of save Israel from just complete and utter catastrophe. And then Israel gets saved by a judge and then revert directly back into some form of just complete bankruptcy. And so this was a time that lasted a long time. Now there were some great characters, some great judges that came up during that time. But in the middle of that time, God places this love story against the backdrop of this really dark time in Israel's history. A very, very controversial time. And it says in verse 1, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons." This is kind of funny, because Bethlehem means house of bread. And Judah means praise. So there's no bread in the house of bread right now. There's a famine in the land. So it's the house of not a lot of bread right now. The house of bread is, the bakery is closed. So, and this man from Bethlehem, Judah, went to travel into the country of Moab. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi. Now, so Moab, let's look at a little bit of the history of Moab. Let me tell you a little bit about where Moab comes from. So, Lot, Abraham's cousin, had an incestual encounter with his 2 daughters. They got him drunk and slept with him, and they ended up having sons. Both of them, he had 2 daughters. They both did it on the same night. I don't know. So this is the start of Moab, okay? Because the 2 sons that those daughters had with their father, one was named Ammon, the other is named Moab. All right? So Moab and Ammon, these 2 sons would become nations that would be bitter enemies of Abraham's descendants. They're going to war all the time. They're going to war in 1 Samuel. They're going to war in 2 Chronicles. In fact, in Numbers 25, why don't you go there? Numbers 25, while the children of Israel are sojourning through the wilderness, trying to make it to the promised land, another really, commendable time for the children of Israel. I say that sarcastically. Let's go to Numbers 25. Let's see another thing that makes Moab famous. Numbers 25, verse 1. Would somebody like to read?
I can.
Oh, go ahead.
25:1.
25:1, yeah.
While Israel lived in Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab.
There you go. So, this is the history of Moab. 25:1, Numbers 25:1. This is the history of Moab. First of all, their lineage comes out of an ancestral encounter with Abraham's cousin. These two nations are going to grow up and be bitter enemies with the descendants of Abraham. And historically, already at this point, Moab and Israel already have a tough history. They already have tension between them because Moab, the women of Moab, who I guess were hot, came in unto the children of Israel and caused them to commit sexual sin and sexual immorality. And it wasn't just that they laid with them. It was that the practice of Moab is under Baal. And it was a religious practice in order to sleep with somebody for Baal, right? So it was not just sleeping around, but it was like blatant idolatry. And so Moab is just a wonderfully fantastic place, you know. It's just a shining combination of what not to do in God's word, okay? And so this man, or actually let's continue to read verse 2. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. Now the meaning of the name Elimelech is God is king. Now have you ever heard of somebody who never lived up to their name? That's this guy, okay? Elimelech, okay? But Naomi's name means pleasant, or my joy. And the name of his two sons is Mahlon and Chilion. Wonderful Klingon names.
Yeah.
One name's, and Mahlon I think means weak, and Chilion means sickly. So weak and sickly, I mean, sick. And when people were born in certain circumstances, it's almost like Indians, you know, how they give them like running bear or something like that. Well, they might have named these children out of the famine, with representation of the famine. But names to not name your kids, weak and sickly. They're Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah, and they came into the country of Moab and continued there. So I don't know if this man got a job offer or something in Moab, but for whatever reason, he decided, without indication that God was leading him to do it, he decided to leave Bethlehem, Judah, the house of bread, the house of his God, and take his family, his wife and his two sons, into Moab. All right? Now, this is a bad move, because you know the history of Moab a little bit. I just showed you a little bit of the history of Moab, and already there's conflict between those two. But the thing is, Elimelech is the father. He is supposed to be the leader of the house. He's supposed to be a good head. This is God's prerogative for his families, that the man is the head. But think of this. The head's job is not just to provide for the family. It's to lead and protect the family. And Elimelech, he is currently taking his wife and sons into a foreign land filled with paganism. Although Israel at this time is not all that much better, but serious. Filled with paganism, filled with idol worship. There's no God-fearing people for his wife to associate with. There's no God-fearing people for their kids or families for their kids to grow up with. There's no God-fearing potentials for the marriage of his sons. And there's no synagogue there for which the people can come and worship together. At least not for the one true God, right? Hebrews 10:23-35 says, let us provoke one another to love and to good works, and forsake not the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some. So he might be chasing, a life to be able to provide for his family, but he's leaving the house of bread, and he's leaving the house of praise in order to do it. And he's taking his family into a land that is known for whoredom, and is known for taking Israelites into sin because of this. So, great lesson on what not to do. All right, so verse 3, and Elimelech, Naomi's husband, he dies there, and she was left and her two sons. And they took them wives of the women of Moab. Why? Because potentially the women of Moab are hot. Because the Israelites because they caused the Israelites to sin and commit sexual immorality in the wilderness. And the name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other is Ruth, and they dwelt there about 10 years. And then Mahlon and Chilion died also, both of them, and the woman was left of her two sons and her husband. So, it's just completely not only is the land famine at this point, Naomi is famine at this point, right? Not just food, but her security is gone, her provider is gone, right? And of course, in that culture, that was everything. Yeah, the man took care of providing for the house. In fact, widows and orphans were like looked down upon so much. They were like very sympathized. That's why in the book of James it says true religion is this, to visit the widow and the orphan, the fatherless, and to keep thyself unspotted from the world. That's James 1:25, I believe. And so they become both of these things. Naomi and the daughters are now widows and orphans. No father, no husband. Okay. So everything goes downhill. Now, this is a good lesson for us because this all happened very rapidly. 10 years. Kind of put yourself in Naomi's position. She's got to wear black at her husband's funeral. And then she's got to wear black at her first son's funeral. And then she's got to wear black again at her second son's funeral. This is heavy stuff. This is not fun. This is not good what's going on. And there's a lesson in this. When things get hard, that is when we need to stay in the house of bread. That's when we need to stay in the house of praise. Because Bethlehem was a house of bread. And yes, there might have been a famine there. Yes, things might have been tough. But when things get tough, the point is to stay in God's house, not to leave it, right? To stay in praise and to stay in the house of bread. The house of bread is another kind of euphemism for the word, because man shall not live by bread alone, right? But by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So to stay in the word and to stay in the praise is a good place to stay. Because when you leave those things, death can start happening. Now let's read verse 6. Would somebody like to read mine? You want to read verse 6?
I have ESV.
Yeah, there's this one.
Okay, verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food.
Awesome. In the KJV it says the Lord had visited his people and is giving and gave them bread. So bread is returning to the house of bread. But why? Because the Lord is visiting his people. During this time of complete moral degeneracy, bankruptcy, breaking of the law, completely rebellion against God in so many facets during the time of the judges, God had removed his presence, removed his visitation a lot because they were under law and they needed to obey to continue to have it. And so in one sense, it could be a chastisement to help them turn back toward him. In another, it's like they're not giving him the legal right in order to be able to bless them. And so, but the Lord has visited his people in Bethlehem, and so she's like, okay, I've taken this, what might have thought had been a vacation for a better life, which turned into a much worse life, and now I'm returning back home to Bethlehem. Verse 7. Wherefore she went forth out of the place where she was, and her two daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return unto the land of Judah. Okay, so Judah and Moab are pretty far from each other. It takes about a 2-week trek through the desert on foot in order to get to Moab from Bethlehem, Judah, and the other way around to get to Bethlehem, Judah from Moab. And so this is a long trek. And she's coming back without a husband, without her 2 sons, and she's coming back with Moabite, daughters, right? She's coming back with the enemy, in essence, right? Verse 8. And Naomi said unto her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me, in reference to the husband and the 2 sons, right? And the Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lift up their voice and wept. So what she is doing is she is loosing them from her care, pretty much. Or she is saying, you don't have to be responsible for me. I'm loosing you. You have no obligations to me. The sons are dead. I have no other sons. Go find a son. Go back to your home which is Moab, which she's leaving from. She says, just go back there, leave me alone. There's nothing for you here. You're loosed from your responsibility. I love you, mwah, kisses, but you don't need to take care of me. I'm going back to Bethlehem, Judah, and I'm just going to roll the dice on my life there. Verse 10, and they said unto her, surely we will return with thee and unto thy people. And Naomi said, turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there yet any more sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should say I have a husband also tonight, and should also bear sons, would you tarry for them till they were grown? Would you stay for them, having husbands, from having husbands? Would you stay for them from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. So she feels that this is the judgment of God on her life. Now, what she's referencing here is called the law of levirate marriage. And let's let the word speak on this one. Law of levirate marriage. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 25. Now, bread is returning to the house of bread because of the Lord's visitation, right? The Lord's presence and inclusion will bring life into lifeless places. All right? It's the presence of the Lord that's bringing life back into the house of bread, right? The Lord has visited his people, therefore bread is coming back into the house of bread. Deuteronomy chapter 25. Is anybody there?
Yeah.
You want to read, Jessica, you want to read verses 5 through 6 right now? I have to keep reading a little bit afterwards.
Okay. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the wife of the dead man shall not be married outside the family to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in to her and take her as her wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And the first son whom she bears shall succeed to the name of the dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel.
Awesome. So this is a law. This is in the law. If a brother, oh, actually, in verse 5, that word husband there is actually the Hebrew word next kinsman. All right. So this is what's talking about the kinsman redeemer. If you guys have ever heard of that. Verse 5: If brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry outside unto a stranger. Her next kinsman or husband's brother shall go in unto her, take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother, and perform the duty of the next kinsman to her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she bears shall succeed in the name of the brother which is dead, that his name be not put out of Israel. I'm going to say this was an obligation of the law. God wanted the children of Israel to stay strong, and he was into posterity. He's into the family lineage lines. In fact, when God curses a line, and he really is pissed off at a group of people, he says, I'm going to wipe off their remembrance from the face of the earth forever. Which that means when he utterly destroys someone, is he destroys their entire family, the genealogy stops with that person, all right? So that was a huge judgment by God onto if somebody did some really heinous act, okay? But on the flip side, God was into preserving the bloodline. He was into preserving the name of his people. And so that's where the law of levirate marriage comes in. Can you continue reading till verse 10, please?
Yes. And if the man does not wish to take his brother's wife, then his brother's wife shall go to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to perpetuate his brother's name in Israel. He will not perform the duty of the husband's brothers to me. Then the elders of the city shall call him and speak to him, and if he persists, saying, I do not wish to take her, then his brother's wife shall go up to him in the presence of all the elders and pull off his sandals, his foot, and spit in his face. Sorry.
Yeah.
And she shall answer and say, so shall it be done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And the name of his house shall be called in Israel the house of him who has his sandals pulled off.
Oh, burn.
Whoa!
The house of the man who has his shoe loosed. That's the KJV. So this alludes to me that this was a big thing, right? Because in order to not do this, to stand against this, if you're the next of kin, you can legally say, I do not want to be the kinsman redeemer. I don't want to take the wife of my brother. You can do that. But the law is, when you do that, you have to stand before a council, you have to take off your shoe and give it in symbolism that you're not taking up this responsibility, and then the wife spits in your face. I mean, so it's pretty much like, you know, it's legal, but it's looked down upon. All right. Now, I want to take a pause. Let's go to Ephesians chapter 5. Think of this idea here. Okay. Ephesians chapter 5. Jessica, can you read Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 to 32?
Do you want me to read it, Jessica?
All right. ESV.
Sure.
Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. All right, tag team, Julie, 24.
There you go.
Good. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, so she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church.
So the mystery of marriage concerning Christ and the church. Now what I want you to think about is this. In 1 Corinthians 6 or 2 Corinthians 6:14, it says, "Be ye not unequally yoked with unbelievers," right? And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, let's go there real quick. Verse 39, if somebody gets there, they can read it.
Wait, chapter what?
7, verse 39, 1 Corinthians 7, verse 39.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. The wife is bound by the law as long as her husband liveth, but if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the Lord.
Only in the Lord. So who do we marry? Marry only in the Lord, right? Other believers. Be not unequally yoked with unbelievers. Now, think of the levirate law of marriage in the Old Testament. The next kinsman was supposed to take up the wife and bring up children under the name of the first husband, right? Which was their brother. In that same sense, that is still the duty today of believers. There's a post-Pentecostal kind of application of this, because the truth is, you're married to Jesus Christ. So the idea there is, you marry in the Lord. But who, when you're rearing up children, and when you're rearing up families, you're rearing them up in the name of their first husband, who is Jesus Christ. And so there's an application, there's a parallel there. You might think of it as just weird traditional thing, but you see how God works this whole thing together to kind of point to what he's going to do through Jesus Christ. Isn't that cool? And God's saying, you know, we're taking, and that's why even if the wife be loosed, say the husband dies or something, the next person who is to be married to is only to be in the Lord, but still bringing up children in the name of the first husband. And the first husband is Jesus Christ. And so that's kind of a cool little application I found in that. But let's go back to Ruth chapter 1. So this mother is talking in Ruth chapter 1, and she's referencing the law of levirate marriage. And what she's saying is, and she's talking to Moabitess women, which they don't necessarily need to live up to this law. But she's saying, look, turn again, my daughters, verse 20, go your way. I'm too old to have a husband. My time of child rearing is past, right? If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband just tonight and should bear sons, would you stay with me till they were grown? So she's saying, even if I did have a husband, and if I had a husband right now, And if I slept with him tonight and got pregnant, would you wait for these children to get full-grown age in order to be able to marry? Would you stay around that long in order to fulfill this law of the next kinsman marrying them? No. I'm loosing you. I am freeing you from this obligation and this responsibility. You guys follow?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you stay for them, having husbands? No, my daughters. It grieves me much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Verse 14. And they lift up their voice and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave to her. And she said, Naomi, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people. So Orpah leaves, kisses Mama, says, you know what, this is actually really good advice, Mom. I love you, I'm going back to Moab. Okay? So she kisses her, but it says that Ruth clave to her. Ruth clave to her, showed her. You know, you can kiss somebody and still leave them. But to cleave to them shows commitment. Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. But it says when a man gets married, he should cleave unto his wife. It's that same word here, clave. That shows commitment, oneness. All right? Verse 15. And she said, behold, thy sister-in-law is gone back unto her people and unto her gods. And unto her gods. That's important. Return now after thy sister-in-law. And Ruth said, entreat me not to leave thee, or to return from following after you. For whither you go, and this is actually a very popular marriage verse. A lot of people use this verse as a marriage verse. For where you go, I will go. And where you lodge, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people, and what?
Your God.
Your God will be my God. So this is kind of an interesting juxtaposition, right? Because Moab is the whoredom place. Moab is like the worst place to go. It's like, but because of the love of this Moabitess, which is completely, it's against. In fact, the book Ruth is the only book in the entire Bible that's named after women, or not. It's one of two named after women, Esther and Ruth, right? But it's the only one in the Bible named after a non-Israelite, if it's about a name. It's the only one outside of Israel. It's the only book in the Bible. And she's here saying, now this is a strong woman. And this is an indication of what cleaving looks like. It means where you go, I'll go. Where you live, I'll live. For your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. That's what cleaving looks like. So when you see in Genesis that says, a man shall leave his mother and father and shall cleave unto his wife, this is insinuated in that. This is implied in that. That they will live together, lodge together, and that they will have one God, and it will be the true God. Verse 17, where you die will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if nothing but death part thee and me. So this is actually a very strong statement that she's saying. Because right now Naomi is saying, I am barren, I have no children, I have no sons, I have no husband, and she is saying, it's because the Lord has done this to me. That's what Naomi is saying, which to me, I'm thinking, y'all left. Like you left, right? You went to Moab, and you want to blame God about it. No. And you don't want to blame Elimelech about it, all right? But this is how people get. People want to blame God for everything. But this is interesting. Moab, or Ruth says, if I leave you, let God do more than he has done to you, under the pretense that you think that God has done all this, let him do more to me, worse to me if I leave you. This is a very strong vow she's making. And that's why verse 18 has a response. When she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left speaking unto her. So she just went, well, I guess you're coming then. Verse 19. So they two went until they came unto Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them, and they said, is this Naomi? So everybody remembers her. The community remembers Naomi. And she said unto me, call me not Naomi, which means pleasant or my joy, but call me Mara, which means bitter. Call me bitter, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. You left, Naomi. He didn't leave, you left. That's what I think, right? But the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full. No, you didn't. It was a famine. You didn't go out full, but in perspective, she was full because she had a husband and 2 sons, right? Perspective. And the Lord has brought me home again empty. Why then call ye me Naomi, seeing the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? So, now I wonder, was Naomi standing next to her while she was saying this? Lord, I went out full and I came back empty. Look at this, I have a Moabitess daughter-in-law and I'm coming back to Bethlehem, Judah. This is the lowest of the low. You know, she wouldn't even leave. I told her to leave. She wouldn't go. You know, like, this is like the lowest of low. And imagine Ruth. I mean, because it's not like the history between Israel and Moab it wasn't like she was ignorant of it. They had like historic battles where they destroyed each other's entire villages. Like, they know each other. And she loves Naomi. And so she's there, and she's ready to roll the dice on life with Naomi. At this point, there's no anticipation. Naomi already said, I'm past having a husband. And so right now, Ruth has really anticipated, I'm single for the rest of my life. She's not going to have any more babies. Nothing's going to happen. But I'm going to stay with her because I love her, and I'm going to try and take care of her. So Ruth is really resolved to do this, right? Verse 22. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, which returned out of the country of Moab. And they came to the house of bread, Bethlehem, in the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, the barley harvest was going to be a great time of celebration, because this first chapter of Ruth really is talking about famine. It's talking about famine in the land, famine in Bethlehem. It's talking about famine morally in the time of the judges. It's talking about famine parentally, because there's no sons. Famine maritally, because there's no husbands. Famine spiritually, because there is no synagogue and there's no worship of the one true God. There is complete desolation, but in the middle of this section, the Lord has visited his people, and bread is coming back into the house of bread. And so, what God is doing in the book of Ruth is he's taking the famine in every area, and then he's giving an indication here, because they return at the beginning of the barley harvest. The barley harvest is supposed to be a time of great celebration, if there's something to harvest, right? Because in a famine, there might not be anything to harvest, but the Lord has visited his people. So, this sets the stage for the book of Ruth. It's famine on all accounts, but there's a little inkling of hope, because bread has just started to come back into the house of Israel. And life and provision and fruit is just about to come back into the lives of Naomi and Ruth. God is going to use the barley harvest as a type and a backdrop and how it operates and how the harvest comes in to show about how blessings come into Naomi and Ruth's life. And so while we continue down this road, I want you to keep these things in mind. Complete and utter famine on every area, right? Widows and orphans, the most not looked down upon as like ill, disgusting, but the most pitied people, as far as I could tell in the Bible, in referencing James 1:25. But then a time, an inkling of hope. Because why? Because the Lord has visited his people. And so the rest of the book of Ruth is about the Lord visiting not only Bethlehem, but visiting the lives and the hearts and the needs and desires of Naomi and Ruth, particularly through a man named Boaz. If you want to hear more, you got to come back next week for chapter 2. Okay?